Welcome to Deciphering Growth, the show that explores mental health from every angle. We bring you conversations with personal opinions, stories, and practical tips. We aim to break down the stigma and help you live your best life. So please sit back and let's dive in. Before we begin, we want to remind our listeners that this podcast represents the opinions of Tiffany Graves, Eric Stone, and the show's guests. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Please consult a healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed are our own and do not represent those of our workplaces. Listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content does not establish a doctor-patient relationship.
All right, we are back.
We are. Hi, everyone. It's good to be back. We have, I think, another very important topic today to discuss, something that I know is really near and dear to both Tiffany and I's hearts. We're going to do a little bit more on childhood resilience specific to childhood trauma. But I will say, Tiffany, if I had to say, I think this is maybe more your domain than mine. I think you have even more expertise. I'm not trying to set you up too much, but I do think you have
Pressure's on.
uh, yeah, let me just keep turning it up. But I think you have some really great expertise, but I also know you have such authentic passion for this. And so I just want to make sure you get to share everything that you have today. So anything you want to just tee us up with as we're starting today?
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit us off the ground running if that's okay. The first thing I want to kind of look at is like, what is resilience? So many times it's misunderstood as the ability just to bounce back from difficulty, but that's just such an oversimplification that misses the real complexities of like trauma recovery. Because true resilience is the adaptation with integrity. It's the capacity to adjust to life's adversities without losing like who you are or while gradually rebuilding it if you have lost it. Um, it also includes growth in the aftermath. It's not just surviving trauma, but it's integrating it. It's learning from it. It's building a meaningful life like after the fact. And then also another part of that is it's non-linear and personal. Resilience doesn't look the same for everyone. It might be
Yeah.
reaching out for help. It might be leaving the situation. It might be even learning to feel your emotions again after years of just being numb. Resilience is a very complex part of trauma recovery, not just bouncing back.
We'll just throw out a trigger warning. There's probably going to be some phrases thrown out that are triggering that have been said to some of our clients, to some of the people in our lives, or maybe ourselves. So, if you're not maybe in a headspace to hear some of those phrases that people say that kind of glorify trauma or minimize trauma and resilience from it, um, maybe not the episode. I like to try to do that every episode, but I want to be specific with what the warning is for. I love what you said, Tiffany. I think we judge people for their ability to bounce back when there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. I'm sure everyone that's listened to a few of our episodes may be sick of me talking about this, but the adverse childhood experience scale that they have at the Cincinnati Museum Center is so powerful. A neutral, positive, negative. You spin the spinner, whichever way you're leaning. A neutral experience will shift it, which just speaks to some of the research of the same thing. Rainy day for some people, not a big deal. Rainy day for somebody that's already dealing with trauma and triggers and a hard day, that will lean them that way, especially when they're kids. So with that, it's not fair. There's a lot of privilege in some of the resiliency research and what we look at. And so there's a lot of even media biases. If we think about some of the news stories that feature people who have beaten the odds or had this miraculous turnaround or fundraiser or lemonade stand that paid the entire hospital bills for everyone in the hospital. those stories stick out because that's normally not what happens, and it's very challenging, and we know that. So don't mean to go too far off track, Tiffany, but just want to.
No, the aces was the next thing that I kind of wanted to touch on. I know we touched on it once, but touching on it again. Just kind of the 10 original aces: the physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, domestic violence, parental substance abuse, mental illness in the home, incarcerated family member, divorce or separation, community violence, racism or discrimination, chronic poverty or food insecurity. And then science notes that if you have just four of these things, you are automatically linked and at a higher risk of depression, anxiety, heart disease, substance abuse, and suicidal ideation.
Wow.
Just four of those things.
And I don't think people understand. I just think it's like it's not really fully sat with or understood, right? That like what that means. So somebody just having four of those is all it would take to have increased risk for so many things, having less positive healthcare outcomes. That is all we're talking about here. That is all that it would take.
Yep. Yeah, just four. Just crazy. 4 of 10, 40%. Yeah.
I will say that I have seen a trend of adults working with adults that there's like this minimization that happens for people who have gone through some of the experiences of
Mhm.
adults. So some of that is the adaptation, finding ways to grow, survive. But these are some of the phrases that I hear a lot working with some of my patients and having just talked to some of my other therapist friends. It wasn't that bad. Other people had it worse.
Ooh, that one.
Yeah, this one I think gets a little. I turned out fine.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's just this almost like dishonoring of their own experiences. So, it's not to say if you went through a traumatic experience, it's like, oh my goodness, no one can ever recover or find a way forward. But it is harder. It is harder. It has a cost associated with it.
It does. It does for sure. I think sometimes we are quick to dismiss the cost because we don't necessarily experience it all the time, 24/7. So I have, it's really one question, despite the fact me wanting to make it a game. True or false that resilience equals toughness?
False.
That is false. It is an extremely damaging cultural myth, especially in environments that prize stoicism, that can harm people's ability to heal. And that's because it shames emotional expression and implies that showing pain means weakness. It pushes people to suppress trauma rather than process it. And it equates enduring abuse with being strong instead of recognizing that real strength often means saying, "This hurts."
Yeah, so I mean, I just think about like we have so many things. That was my headphone case. That's embarrassing for me. I don't even know if that could be heard, but I felt like I
I
could
didn't
feel
hear
it.
anything. We're going to see if we can
That's
edit
good.
that out.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I I think of just some of the situations that people encounter, and so one of the things just locally here in Butler County, we're having a huge crisis for veteran mental health. I forget the exact percent. I think veterans make up like about 8% of the population in Butler County, but they're represented in like about 33 to 40% of the suicides so far, deaths by suicides this year, which just really, I think, speaks to like that increased risk that they are having. So I think the number breakdown right now in 2025 is that a veteran versus a non-veteran in Butler County has a risk of death by suicide 9 times higher than a non-veteran, which is just
Whoa.
absolutely a horrifying stat. But why I'm bringing it up when we talk about stoicism is that a lot of discussion. I am not a veteran. I appreciate my veteran colleagues and getting to work with veterans. Is this like they're taught this at a very basic level of okay, like pain is weakness leaving the body, and you don't see what you can do on your own, be independent, go. And there is so much value in so many settings to being stoic, to having composure, to lead, to handle a crisis, but it's okay to ask for help. And so just kind of weaving that in of like it's okay to be that tough person, and also tough people are allowed to need help and support. And that doesn't, so that's a think speaks to a problem where I'm experiencing here locally in Butler County. So just wanted to speak to the stoicism part of like there is a lot ingrained in masculinity, and within first responder military culture about you need to be able to handle a lot of things and not need other people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's disheartening to hear.
Yeah, if anyone listening is interested, there is a Butler County Veteran Suicide Prevention Committee they meet once a month on the fourth Thursday of the month at 2 o'clock at the Butler County Service Commission. And you can also join virtually via WebEx. So if anyone is passionate or just wants to show their support for local veterans, I know it would be much appreciated in person or virtual. Uh, Very important cause that I think a lot of people are passionate about.
Yeah. And we will post those resources to our Patreon so they will be consistently available for you guys if you can't find it. So, next question for you. How would you define true resilience?
Oh, gosh. Oh, man. I'm so torn. I am gonna try to give a real answer that doesn't cheat. I feel like uh, someone's ability to bounce back is the easy definition. I like to look at the person though, and I think we need to look at the person because we don't know what they're bouncing back from. So, like someone who has a high ACE score versus none, like what's the expectation? So even if they're coping about the same with a stressor in this season of life, they're both 30 and have the same job or something, like who's more resilient there? Well, probably the person who has gone through all those different things versus the person who maybe has not. But I don't know, that's a it's a tough answer. I want to give more, but I think that's as much as I can probably reasonably back up.
Yeah. So I kind of just bullet pointed here that resilience is vulnerability, seeking support, knowing your limits, and knowing to say no to what breaks you down.
Well, that was well said, Tiffany. I like that. Straight into the point.
I'd like to be direct sometimes, maybe a little too blunt.
No, I
Right.
think that's helpful.
So there's two different ways that I guess I'm kind of looking at to take this. We can either dive into some of the protective factors that help support resilience in people, or I could do my side tangent on the neurobiology of
I want some neuroscience. Let's go
just neuroscience. Woo!
Neuroscience.
All right. So, how adversity shapes our brain. So, when a child is exposed to chronic, overwhelming stress, especially without a protective adult relationship, we call this toxic stress oftentimes. And that can be abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual. Words today are hard. Emotional neglect, that can be being ignored, unseen, or invalidated, living in a chaotic or unsafe home, substance use, domestic violence, instability, poverty, racism, community violence, and system-based trauma. We kind of lump that under like toxic stress. Um, in those types of environments, the brain learns to prioritize survival over development, though. So, what that means is our brain's alarm system becomes overactive in unsafe environments. Children develop hypervigilance, so they're constantly scanning for danger. Even neutral faces or tones can sometimes be interpreted as threats because of this hypervigilance. So an example of this would be a child flinching when someone raises their hand, or even if they're trying to play, because their brain could associate that movement with like, oh, something bad is going to happen to me. Um, it also affects our memory and learning. So oftentimes, our memory like shrinks in response to chronic trauma. So you can see children have difficulty forming clear memories, or they get stuck in like loops of traumatic recall. Learning in school environments can be impaired because the brain is on alert and it's not able to absorb new information because it's stuck in that like I need to survive kind of cycle. And then this can lead to underdevelopment and executive functioning due to that constant stress activation. There can be impulse control problems, issues with organization, decision making, and emotional regulation struggles. Um, and oftentimes, this can be viewed when we see a child who's labeled as defiant or explosive. Usually, they tend to have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, like due to that trauma of being stuck in like survival mode. And it's not necessarily a behavioral disorder.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I love
Um,
the science.
yeah, I have more science.
Yay!
uh, in response to that persistent threat, children can develop what we call survival brain. So safety over exploration gets prioritized. So sometimes you might see kids that aren't as like engaged in on the playground and things of that nature. They tend to view the world more through a lens of am I safe or am I not? They can often misread social cues as a result of this, so seeing rejection as a neutral interaction. And they can experience difficulty with trust, attachment, and play styles. Um, I want to make it clear, though, that this isn't necessarily like a flaw. It's an adaptive survival response that the brain is doing to make sure this child is surviving in an unsafe environment. Um, so kind of a talking point that I had for us to maybe dive a little deeper into is if a child grows up in a war zone, whether
Mm.
literal or emotional, their nervous system becomes a soldier, always scanning, never resting. And we often expect these kids to act like diplomats, but their brains are doing their job and keeping them alive.
Wow. It's interesting we came as everyone probably does, we don't talk to each other as we're preparing. We like to see what the other person comes up with. But I kind of prepared the same way, Tiffany, of like kind of preparing how does resilience show up in adults? So not maybe recognizing coping mechanisms were formed early. So being able to read a room in seconds because you had to, struggle to rest because rest didn't feel safe, overachieving because worth was tied to performance. As adults, we have the power to revisit those parts of the stories with not with the shame, but with compassion. And therapy is where some of those adaptations that were survival strategies maybe can be worked through. So I love this quote. Resilience doesn't mean you weren't affected. It means you found a way to keep going despite the impact.
Yes. Yep, exactly. The good news is, though, we have neuroplasticity, which means our brain essentially can heal. Just as your brain adapts to fear, it can rewire towards safety, especially in the presence of consistent, emotionally attuned relationships. It doesn't come from telling a child they're safe. It comes from showing them over and over and over in small moments that they're safe. So different ways we can help rewire the brain: classic therapy, play therapy for children, EMDR, somatic experiencing are all great ways. Emotionally safe caregivers who help co-regulate and validate the child's inner world can help rewire that brain. Creating predictability and structure, the opposite of chaos, can be really important in helping rewire children's brains to understand they're safe. Mindfulness, breathwork, and body-based practices can also help teach children's nervous systems how to downregulate when they're feeling stuck in that activated space. Um, and then just role modeling healthy attachment relationships. Even just one stable adult can change an entire child's trajectory of where they're going. Um,
Mm.
and something to keep in mind is brains grow in the context and confines of relationships. That was, that's where protection is wired or not wired, and that's where it can be rewired. We function from experiences with relationships, and those relationships kind of inform how we move about the world.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
I love the science. I don't know. I'm the kind of person I hear the science and I just have to like take it in a little bit. It's just funny. It's like my brain will register it in a few minutes what you're saying, but I like love it so much and I think it's like so important. And so I think it speaks to um just differences in pieces, but I love it so much. So I love seeing you get excited, Tiffany, and
Yeah.
passionate about the way we heal. It's a powerful piece.
It's crazy what our brain can do. That being said, I do want to kind of pull us into the present a little bit with that. Like while that early trauma can leave a mark, I do want to put out there's no expiration date for when healing can happen.
Mm,
Adults who experience, trauma as kids or some of these, toxic stress environments, you can still retrain your nervous system. Practices like inner child work, reparenting, trauma informed yoga, relational therapy, and other forms of therapy can help you rebuild the safety that you never received and help you feel more at ease with your systems. Something to think about, to reflect upon is what did your younger self need that they didn't receive? And how can you offer that to yourself now without shame, but with compassion?
I love that. I literally have the same prep again, so I'm like, Tiffany and I are getting good at this, or we're just our methods are the same, but I love it. So I kind of prepped a little bit of like how to support resilience, and so just naming the story, whether it's journaling, therapy, I little plug, podcasting, put words to what happened. What did I need that I didn't get? Reclaim safety, regulating, teaches your nervous system that safety is possible, body work, boundaries, breath work. And this one I think is huge. Be the adult you needed, whether you're parenting, mentoring, or just showing up for your inner child. Be gentle, be present, and be patient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess like I know this isn't what you work with often, but I'm a little curious. Does substance use complicate if you run into someone who has, childhood trauma and you're trying to help them like retrain or reparent themselves?
Yes. The quick is yes. The long is um like some people grow up in environments where they don't know that misusing a substance or dependence on a substance is anything wrong. And so then by the time they do know that it is, it's already a very set uh, coping skill or habit. So that's really challenging. But also, if you're trying to self medicate or numb, as a therapist, I love therapy. I love my community. I'm grateful for the supports I have, but I also have to check my privilege that not everybody has the same access to supports, the information, and maybe the healthcare literacy to navigate through. And I just have to say, I can drive 5 minutes from my house in any direction and find alcohol at a gas station or a restaurant. You will not drive 5 minutes in any direction from my house and find a therapist office or one that is able to see you or go. So I do think sometimes we have to break down the access of substances is far greater than the access of healthcare support and therapy. Um, and not to blast any of my therapy colleagues that's trying to make a living, sometimes it's cheaper. It's cheaper to go buy a pack of beer than it is to maybe self-pay for a therapy intake or pay out of pocket for co-pays. So um, don't say that to shame and blame the therapist, but also not to shame the clients. Like sometimes there is a reality of like, what does substances give? So as a substance use counselor, I do focus a lot on breaking down like what are the substances giving you, what are you self-medicating, and maybe breaking down where that is challenging because sometimes it numbing is helpful, but sometimes when we're numb, we feel even more or things hit even worse than another situation. So I think it can be a double-edged sword sometimes. So if you are in recovery or battling the disease of addiction and need of extra support, there's so many great resources from AA to NA to SAMHSA to NAMI to Smart Recovery to therapy to religious institution. You can find support wherever it is, but I just want to encourage you, recovery is possible. And like you don't need to feel shame for where you're coming from. We all have to start somewhere. There's been some tough seasons of my life where I've not been in the healthiest place. So I got to a healthier place by getting help and get telling people what was going on. And so I hope that anyone going through that can find someone safe and someone that can help them in that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just kind of brings me to point out that, like, just as like substance abuse can have an impact, developmental trauma versus single event trauma can also be impactful. So not all trauma comes from a singular event. For many, it's like a slow burn, a daily erosion of safety, nurturance, or belonging that kind of like complicates that trauma. Yeah. So I guess like I had two kind of explorative points for this one. What are, I guess I hate to use the word why, but like I wrote the word why. Why kids who experience neglect or emotional abuse struggle just as much or sometimes more than those who experience a singular traumatic event such as a car accident.
Say that one more time. I need to resonate with it more.
Um, I'm gonna change the wording because the why is bothering me. I hate the
Sorry.
word why so much.
Sorry, I was just like, I think I need to reset myself.
That's okay. What are the reasons kids who experience neglect or emotional abuse struggle just as much, sometimes more, than those who experience a singular traumatic event such as a car accident?
So the question is, what if someone who goes through a car accident that's gone through childhood trauma, why does that impact them more, or how does it
So if
impact
you
them
have
more?
two kids, one saw a car accident or was in a car accident, and the other one
Okay.
was in like one of the ACEs situation, what's the reason these individuals usually struggle more than someone who's only
Oh,
like a car accident?
well, I think we could just break it down. It's increased. You have less capacity to cope with the thing that you're facing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, if someone had a higher ACE score and they go through the same trauma, there's just an increased risk and likelihood that the person with a higher ACE score could develop traumatic responses, have stress. I mean, we could even break this down a little bit further. Just like, hey, if a really busy person goes through something, or someone with like more things going on than less goes through the same thing, higher chance of it impacting them negatively would be just my quick version. I don't know what you would throw in for that, Tiffany.
Yeah, I mean, your brain, I kind of view it like a battery. You have to like use so much of your battery every day. And if someone is in an environment where it's a constant battery drain, and then there's another event that happens that takes even more energy, they're going to struggle a lot more because their energy is just being sucked by other things. So at the end of the day, they don't have as much energy left over to like exert in terms of like being able to function as effectively. I know some people like spoon theory as well. So if we're looking at it that way, someone who has a high ACEs score might only start out with 6 spoons every day versus someone who has a low ACEs score starts out with like 10 spoons. They just don't have as much energy to function in the same capacity as someone who has more spoons. And that's not to throw like shame or
Yeah.
shade or blame for anyone if you have trauma and you do start with more spoons. Just as more of an acknowledgement of like you might start your day with more spoons and you might have to adjust your day accordingly. And while that sucks, that life is traumatic, being aware of that can help you still have a fulfilling life for yourself.
Yeah, we're on the same team. I think that's the thing where sometimes it's like, well, who has it worse? It's like, well, like we can go into that, but like it's okay that we're all dealing with something. I mean, even just the state of the world, we don't have enough time for that today. But the state of the world is very traumatic for a lot of people right now. And so I don't think I have to be like, well, you don't have it. It's like think we can just acknowledge others' experiences. But I love this episode. I like talking
Yeah.
about this. I think sometimes the challenge that Tiffany and I find is trying to break this down into a practical way, but also where it's helpful and informative and like how do you use this info. So I appreciate Tiffany you bringing in some of the neuroscience pieces today.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to do my best. Um, Something else I guess that came on my mind that I wanted to kind of like talk about before I run out of time, if it'll process in my brain, is that like we are on the same team. What always comes to mind for me is that someone might experience a car accident and it might not phase them. Someone might experience a car accident and it might be like debilitating. It's not our place to judge or compare our experiences to others because our experience is so unique to ourselves that we don't really have anything that's fair to compare it to. And we need to remember that. Like, while I know as humans we love to compare ourselves to where we should be at or what we should be doing, but in reality, our uniqueness to ourselves is so vast and so different that like we're doing ourselves a disservice by not acknowledging like it's okay to like tailor our journey in a way that best suits our needs.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah. So that's
Mm.
kind of like all of my spiels on the science. I don't know if we missed anything that you wanted to talk about or not.
No, I think maybe just in closing, just encourage people to not judge their own experience and try to support those they can in their life. And at the same time, it's okay if you have enough going on your plate that you just got to take care of yourself for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Always prioritize yourself. Self-care is not selfish. My biggest takeaway from grad school, self-care is not selfish.
I love it so much.
Uh, all right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I think we're going to wrap up for today. We appreciate you guys being here. It's always fun getting to share our insights and getting in touch with everyone. And until next time, we hope to see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Deciphering Growth. We hope you found our conversation helpful and insightful. Subscribe to our podcast for more episodes and check out our Patreon for more content. Don't hesitate to contact us on social media if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.